Morning.
Good morning.
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 Morning, Jetty.
Morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. George, if you're talking, I can't hear you. Is it just me?
No, I can't hear George either.
Hi, Lynn's here.
Hey, Lynn, we're trying to get George's audio.
Okay, well, I don't feel so bad. I don't feel so bad being late. I've been trying to get the video to work, and it's not working. So, I've been trying to sign in through GoToMeeting, and it's not good. So I'll just stay on the phone.
George, are you clicking on the cog in the upper right? It looks like a cog. It's the settings. And then under audio on microphones, like my computer often defaults to my headset. So you might have to try selecting like an array, or the computer array is often what you want under the audio.
George, we still can't hear you. It looks like you are not muted on your microphone on the screen, but maybe you have a mute button somewhere else.
Okay, still working here.
We can hear you, Nan.
You can hear me now?
Yes. I don't know what you did, but it worked.
How about that? I went to something called internal microphone, which I thought I already had, but anyway, good morning. Wonderful morning to solve some technical problems. Any other technical problems out there? Okay, we have a quorum. Can I have a motion to accept the agenda?
This is Linda, so moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, good. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Okay, let's move on then to Mr. Jackson.
Hi, George. I was just going to set the table a little bit.
Okay,
Very
please do.
briefly. Very briefly, you're all probably wondering why this is back. And the reason is we realized after the board approved this lease at the meeting a few months ago that it needed, because it's a lease, it needed to go through a New Mexico Finance Board process. And so that is a very technical process. They have very specific criteria for the leases they approve, and then they also want a resolution from the board as opposed to just minutes showing the approval. And so we're back because the board required some substantive lease changes that are different from the lease that the board approved, and we need it to be in the form of a resolution. And Wade, my law partner Wade Jackson's been taking the lead on getting those cleanups done. Corey's been highly involved. John Milks, the other party, the opposing party on the lease, has been involved and agreeable to the changes. And so I'm going to have Wade go ahead and walk the board through the details of what's changed since the last approval.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I'll leave it high level and try to answer any questions that you have. The primary substantive change is that the lease that we proposed called for the lessee to pay rent per carrier, $500 per carrier. The Board of Finance objected to that term for reasons I really can't explain. I think the lease had the potential of generating even more revenue for the college. In its prior form, what was expressed to us is that the Board of Finance, the administration, wanted control over those other carriers, and the option form of lease wouldn't allow them to do that. So what we've done, as Lynn indicated, Mr. Milks has agreed to all of this. Basically, we kind of threw up our hands and agreed to do what the Board of Finance wanted to get the thing approved and get this project moving. We agreed to those changes. We agreed to the insertion of some language that the Board of Finance required. In particular, they required that the lease be contingent on the Board of Finance's approval. We had to get that approval anyway, so that was not a big deal. There were a couple of other items I can talk about if you're interested. But basically, what we have now, the revised lease together with the resolution, we believe is a package that the Board of Finance will approve, and we can finally get this project moving. I just want to say thank you to Corey for all of her work on this. She's been taking the lead in making the changes and dealing with the contractor and the Board of Finance staff as well. And it's been a frustrating process, but I think we're finally there. Happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Do you want to clarify, Wade, the rental fee from the users of the tower, the $500? Is that gone, or has that changed in some other way?
Yes, sir. So what we did, the previous lease, the lease we had originally proposed, called for rent in the amount of $500 per carrier. At the present, and I'll ask Corey to correct me if I'm wrong here, but as it stands right now, there are 2 carriers lined up. So what we did was change that to a flat fee of $1,000, which is what the rent would have been, and sort of take away the contingency for additional carriers in the future. Again, I can't explain exactly why the Board of Finance wanted that change. It doesn't make a lot of sense for the college, but it is what they are requiring.
So does that mean the future carriers would not have to pay anything because the current carriers would foot the entire bill?
Not necessarily. So what we're dealing
Well-
with here is the lease of the college's property to Gravity Pad for operation of the pad and the pole. And so we could have some separate agreement with additional carriers for use of that pole, which would not necessarily be a lease of real property, which is what requires approval of the Board of Finance. It would be a license to use that pole or something along those lines. So I think that possibility is there. It's just not explicitly spelled out in advance in the lease as it was as we had drafted it.
Yeah, this is Lynn. I mean, I think the way I understand how this whole deal is going to work is the college's lease is with Gravity Pad, and then they do separate deals with the carriers, and they get. I mean, if there's 4 carriers, they're going to charge carrier 3 and 4 to add their equipment to this tower. The way things are drafted now, the college does not get additional benefit. The college gets the flat $1,000 rent, period. It doesn't. Sean will get, or Gravity Pad will get the benefit if he's able to sell to more than 2 carriers. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It would take, we do not have that additional agreement that I mentioned in place now. It would take an additional agreement that does not currently exist for the college to receive any revenue from additional carriers beyond the 2 that are on the hook right now.
Zuby, you had a question?
I'm just wondering, in the event, are there opportunities in the future? Are we locking ourselves in to this where you could put 12 carriers up and we could never recoup any revenue? Is that the way it sets right now, or would there be opportunities in the future for us to look into charging extra for the extra carrier?
The way it stands right now, the college is receiving a flat rent payment of $1,000 from Gravity Pad. It would receive nothing if additional carriers were signed up. Again, I think there's potential for. I mean, the way the lease was structured was a fee per carrier. So I think Gravity Pad would not necessarily be opposed to that sort of arrangement, but it does not exist now, and frankly, he wouldn't have a whole lot of incentive to agree to that, having this arrangement more or less forced upon us by the administration.
And so just to clarify, well, to add a little bit of information, Sean Milks does not believe that we would ever have 4 vendors on the poll. And that's really the max of this poll. It's not as if there could be 12 different services running off this poll. It's really a 4-service poll. He thought there was perhaps a potential to have a 3rd. Now, one other piece of information is that we did an appraisal of the cell tower, and the lease, the minimum that we should receive is $660 a month. So that's based on an appraisal, a comparison of other similar cell towers. So really $1,000 a month is it fair. We're not being cheated or anything. But it's my understanding that the Board of Finance would not really be interested in us engaging in a agreement that included sub-carrier leases, just simply because they have no control over it. So having spoken with the Board of Finance folks, they're not prepared to offer like an approval of that type of an agreement. So we were basically forced to choose this type of path. So
I mean, I don't know if we want to get in the weeds on this, but there have been some demands from and we're working with sort of an employee within the administration, not the board itself, and some of the changes have not been particularly logical. But, I think that the college's primary interest in doing this deal is to improve cell service on campus. And through the appraisal process, we have confirmed that the college is, even under this new deal, going to get fair market value for the lease of the easement or the ground where this is going to be. And so it's been a balance of, making the approval process is so that there's some oversight and the board makes sure that the college is entering into a fair deal.
That's an excellent point. I'm glad you brought that up. I said earlier we kind of gave up on trying to get approval of the agreement that we had put together. I think that's true, but I think this agreement that the board will approve accomplishes the goals. I mean, this is going to improve cell service. It does generate $1,000 of revenue for the college. It takes away that little bit of flexibility, but as Corey said, it was not certain that there was going to be any additional revenue, and it would not have been, it would have been another $500, not any kind of windfall. So I think the agreement that the Board of Finance will approve accomplishes what the college wants to achieve.
Yeah, that does sound reasonable, because our interest was indeed improving service on campus primarily. How about the issue of changes in the future, both technological and other changes? Is there any way that this contract is open to renegotiation if there's some kind of technological change and all of a sudden they do want to put on 5 carriers or 10 carriers, or in other words, somehow anticipating the possibility of changes in the near future? So could we, with Gravity Pad, could we change the contract with Gravity Pad if there's some significant change that they want to make? Lynn?
Well, I'm working from memory, and Wade's going to have to step in here. I mean, my recollection of the last lease that was approved is that these work in 5-year increments, and at some point the college has consent rights. I don't remember offhand when those kick in, so I'm hoping Wade has that in front of him. And there may be an opportunity there if there is a substantial change in technology or the use of the tower that
Right.
the college could try to adjust. That may be a very narrow opportunity. There are, at least in the original lease, and I went Wade to confirm that these are still there, that there are increases based on a percentage every 5-year renewal period.
Increases
So in the rent
okay.
college receives. So Wade, can you confirm none of that has changed?
No, you're exactly right. So none of that has changed. The rent is scheduled to increase over time. It is
7.5% after 5 years, I think.
right, 7.5% after the first 5 years, the first 5-year term. The term automatically renews basically it's 5-year increments, and so it goes up 7.5%. There are those consent rights that Lynn mentioned, but before you even get to that, the permitted use of the leased property is for the construction, operation, maintenance, repair, and replacement of wireless infrastructure and communications equipment. So that's that's written broadly enough that if there is a change in technology, it's not necessarily this particular use that's going to be in effect, next month when the lease is approved and the project gets underway. There's some wiggle room there to allow, basically, because the college is not in the business of operating the thing or staying up to date. That's what the contractor is for. He's out there putting the carriers on the pole, and so if that technology changes a year or 5 years or 10 years down the road, the use of the leased property is general enough that we can implement that.
Right.
As I read it, in the event that the technology changes in a way that is not suitable to the lessee, they can terminate, but we do not have that similar right. In section 11, I believe, it spells that out.
So, yes, I think the way you phrase that, I think that's right. If the technology changes, and falls within that allowed use of the lease, then yes, it's the lessee, because the lessee is making the investment, constructing the pole, etc. He wants to have some assurance that that's going to remain in place for the life of the lease. I guess I'm having a hard time thinking of an example of what that would be. If something were truly not acceptable to the college, obviously that's something that we would dive into and try to take action on.
Any other comments, questions, concerns?
Chair Gamble, this is Jody. I do have just one more question on something you said, Mr. Jackson. You said there were a couple other minor changes. Could you briefly touch on those?
Yes, as Lynn alluded to, it appears that what we have is a staff member with a checklist trying to make sure that that the items on the checklist are included in the lease, whether or not they make any sense. And so there was language added. As I mentioned, there's language added that the lease does not become effective until the Board of Finance approves. Obviously, that's redundant with the process because we have to submit an unexecuted lease to the board for approval and then execute it afterward. Similarly, and not designed for this project or this type of document, but the Board of Finance requires language that the lease will be automatically terminated if sufficient appropriations are not made to the college to pay what's required under the lease. That may make sense in a lot of contexts. It doesn't make any sense in this context where the college isn't paying anything, the college is getting paid. But again, we in talks with Corey and Sean Milks, we basically said, okay, there's no harm to the college. If you want to put these things in there, we're happy to agree to that. I think those were it. Corey, let me know if I missed anything that you can think of, but I think those were the main things. I mean, as I said, the substantive change was to that contingent, per carrier rent.
Right.
You're correct.
Yeah, I saw those changes. I wasn't sure what they referred to, so thanks for the clarification.
Corey, anything else to add?
No, thank you. We're just trying to meet their requirements so we can get this project moving on. Thanks.
Right. Okay. Any other comments, concerns?
I guess my concerns that led me to vote against it in the original form would still stand in this case. So I believe we'll pass this, but I still have concerns about getting into a long-term lease with no real capability of regulating what sorts of technologies are put on within the close proximity to the college.
So these are 5-year leases. Is that correct?
But 10 of them going up to 50 years.
Right, but at any point we can not approve a new lease, right?
I don't think that's correct. I don't think that's
Yeah,
correct. I
it's
think
not.
they have.
The renewal is pretty close to automatic. And Wade, I can't remember if there is language in there that requires the college to consent, but there's also language that says that consent must be, cannot be unreasonably withheld, that sort of thing. And I think a few of the early renewals are automatic, and then the consent kicks in. But if you could walk them through that provision, because I think they do need to understand that the lessee does have pretty significant renewal power.
Yeah, that's right. So the initial term is 5 years. The first 4 5-year renewal terms are automatic. So essentially a 25-year period. And then after that, excuse me, the lessee has the right to extend an additional 5-year terms, an additional 25 years with written consent from the college, not to be unreasonably withheld. So that's, reasonable obviously depends on the facts, but I think that would bring into play, whether or not the technology remains up to date, whether or not we have other opportunities, things like that. But for the first 25 years, it is essentially automatic.
Yeah, and to give some explanation, these kinds of infrastructure investments, Sean needs that kind of long-term commitment to be able to then turn the carriers who are going to insist on the ability to have their equipment there and working. Because it's the equipment plus I'm sure there's some back of the house technology to get it all hooked up and maintenance, and they're not going to put that kind of capital out there without a longer term commitment than 5 years. That for this kind of a project, these long terms are pretty standard.
Right. Where do they get the electricity for this tower?
I
We give them
believe
the
that
right
they're running.
install.
Yeah, they're
I'm
running
sorry.
a lot. They're going to hook it up. They're not getting electricity from the college.
Okay. Okay, any other concerns? If not, could I have a motion to approve this, to consider this contract?
Second.
Okay, could I have a motion to approve? Could I have an indication of approval?
Aye.
Aye.
3, 4, Zuby,
And a nay.
and I. So motion is approved, contract is approved. Okay. Thank you all very much. Is there any other business that we need to attend to today? No, very good.
Thank you,
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
thank you all very much for showing up for an early meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Motion to,
Thanks,
Motion to
everyone.
adjourn.
Bye-bye.
Motion to adjourn?
Bye, thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. All approved. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.